He hit me. More than once. Her voice cracked, just enough to sound fragile, just enough to sound believable. The courtroom fell silent. All eyes turned to me. My attorney, Mr. Reeves, turned his head sharply in disbelief. I didn't flinch. The judge, a firm-jawed woman in her 60s, leaned back and folded her hands, measuring me with her eyes. I could feel my pulse in my temples. One lie. One single sentence. And just like that, I was a monster. It didn't matter that I'd never raised my voice to her, that I'd once driven across 3 states to bring her soup when she had the flu, that I was the one who covered rent when she lost her job for the 3rd time. Now I was the villain because she needed me to be, and she knew how to cry on command. I turned my head slightly, locking eyes with her. A blink. A smug little twitch at the corner of her lips. That's when I knew she thought she'd already won. But what she didn't know was that I had come prepared. My name is Matthew Callahan, and I never imagined I'd be accused of something so vile, so far removed from who I am, that it would shake the very ground beneath my feet. I'm 38 years old, born and raised in Asheville, North Carolina. I run a mid-sized architecture firm that specializes in restoring historic homes. My friends would probably describe me as reserved. Methodical. The kind of guy who'd triple-check the locks every night and keep receipts filed in color-coded folders. I met Samantha Grayson at a fundraiser for veterans housing. She was everything I wasn't: spontaneous, loud, a little chaotic. She wore this crimson dress that clashed with the roses on the tablecloths, but it worked for her. Everything about her screamed, "I don't follow rules," and maybe that's what drew me in. We dated for 8 months before she moved in with me. I had an old craftsman house near Charlotte that I was fixing up after work hours. Samantha said it felt like living inside a painting. For a while, it felt like we were building something real. Her career in event planning was picking up, and I was landing bigger projects. But the cracks started small. She'd forget things constantly: where she parked, whether she'd paid rent at her old place, how much she drank. I dismissed them at first. She had a tough childhood, she said. No stable home. Her dad used to take off for weeks at a time. I made excuses for her. Told myself love was supposed to be forgiving. Then came the night she totaled her car and blamed me for not answering the phone. I was in a client meeting. She showed up outside my office barefoot and sobbing. She said I abandoned her. She made me feel like her downfall was my failure. I should have known better. One night, I overheard her on the phone with someone, her voice soft, sweet, different than how she spoke to me. I didn't confront her then. Instead, I bought cameras and installed them in the house. I hated myself for it, but something inside me whispered, "Protect yourself." The recordings didn't catch cheating, at least not physical. But they caught manipulation. She staged arguments when I was on Zoom calls. She threw plates off shelves and said I pushed her. The cameras caught it all. Quietly. Silently. Until the day she filed for a restraining order. That was the start of my unmaking. My own sister, Emily, asked if I had a temper. My coworkers gave me wide-eyed stares. It didn't matter that I'd never so much as raised my voice in anger. The accusation alone was enough to tip the scales. And yet, through all of this, I didn't release the footage. I didn't share the audio. I held on. Not because I was protecting her, but because I still couldn't believe it had come to this. A small part of me wanted her to stop, to apologize, to say it got out of control. But instead, she took it further. She filed a civil suit, claimed emotional abuse, career sabotage, and physical threats. Her lawyer submitted photos of bruises. I knew they weren't real. The timestamp metadata didn't even match our address. Still, I didn't retaliate. Not yet. That's when I called Benjamin Carter, a private investigator I'd worked with once, when a client of mine was being harassed by a former tenant. Ben was calm, methodical, an ex-Marine turned forensic analyst. I showed him what I had: footage, texts, timestamps. He reviewed everything, quietly nodding. "She's building a narrative," he said. "But it's a house of cards. You just need the right breath to knock it down." That breath came in the form of a backup drive I'd forgotten about, my home server. One of the cameras had been auto-saving clips to a separate archive. It had footage of her staging scenes, bruising her arm with a frozen spoon, whispering instructions to a friend on speakerphone. I watched every minute with a numb ache in my gut. She was performing. But this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about identity. My name. My reputation. Everything I'd built from the ground up. The next few weeks blurred into lawyer meetings, evidence preparation, sleepless nights. I remember one conversation with my grandmother, Lorraine Callahan, who raised me after my parents died in a car crash when I was 12. She sat across from me at her kitchen table, nursing a lukewarm cup of peppermint tea. "She's not breaking you," she said. "She's just revealing how strong you already are. Don't fight her with fire, baby. Fight her with facts." Those words became my anchor. When the court hearing date arrived, I walked into that building not to fight Samantha, but to reveal her. Because truth, once shown, doesn't need volume. It just needs light. The courtroom was too quiet for a Monday morning. You could hear the creak of the judge's chair when she shifted, the tapping of someone's nervous heel on tile, the occasional breath drawn in too sharply. All eyes were still on Samantha as she dabbed the corner of her eye with a tissue, folded delicately like it came from a makeup kit, not a courtroom bench. The judge cleared her throat. "Mr. Callahan, your counsel may respond." My attorney, Mr. Reeves, stood, calm, composed. "Your Honor, if we may, the defense would like to introduce several items into evidence before proceeding with further questioning." The judge nodded slowly. "Proceed." This was it. From my briefcase, I pulled out the manila folder. Nothing fancy, just thick enough to hold the truth. Ben Carter had helped me organize it, time-stamped, labeled, cross-referenced with digital metadata. Everything in line. No room for doubt. I handed it to Mr. Reeves. "Exhibit A," he said, holding it up. A series of home surveillance clips recorded by security cameras inside Mr. Callahan's residence during the time Ms. Grayson claims abuse took place. The judge looked up sharply. Samantha's attorney, Dana Whitmore, stood halfway. "Your Honor, I'd like to file an immediate objection." "On what grounds?" the judge asked, eyebrows raised. "Violation of privacy, potential tampering." I spoke, not loudly, but just enough. "Your Honor, the property is legally mine, the cameras were legally installed, and Ms. Grayson was notified upon moving in. We have her written acknowledgement." Mr. Reeves slid the second folder forward. "That would be Exhibit B, Your Honor." The signed tenancy agreement. Samantha's face changed, barely but enough. Her eyes darted from the folder to me, and then back to her lawyer. That twitch of her jaw. That swallow. She knew. The first video played on the small monitor facing the bench. A quiet kitchen. Samantha pacing in front of the microwave. Suddenly, a crash off-screen. She enters the frame holding a broken plate, then presses it into her arm, wincing. The next clip, she's on the phone, whispering dramatically. "He threw it. I think he was drunk." There was no audio manipulation. The clips played just as they were, raw and damning. Ms. Whitmore tried to recover. "These clips don't prove he didn't hurt her." The judge leaned forward. "Counselor, we're not discussing a lack of evidence. We are now addressing fabricated evidence. That is a far more serious matter." Samantha's posture had folded into itself, shoulders hunched, hands clenched. We continued. Clip after clip. Footage of her Googling how to mimic bruises, another of her texting someone named Chloe. "I just need him out. The court will believe anything if you cry hard enough." I didn't even react. I sat still, hands folded, watching the footage like I'd never seen it before. It wasn't about proving her wrong. It was about letting the facts do what her lies never could, stand on their own. The most devastating moment came in a clip from 3 months earlier. Samantha pacing in the guest bedroom. "She thinks she's smart," she said into her phone. A pause. "No, I've got it handled. Matthew's too proud to fight dirty. He won't even use the camera footage unless I push hard enough. He still thinks I'm salvageable. Idiot." My jaw clenched. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. The judge sat in complete silence. Finally, she leaned back, and for the first time all morning, she looked tired. "Miss Grayson," she said quietly, Do you have anything to say before we move forward? Samantha opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She glanced at her lawyer, who simply shook her head, helpless. Ms. Whitmore had realized she was standing on a sinking ship. Mr. Reeves, the judge continued. Thank you. We'll recess for 30 minutes. I'll be reviewing all submitted evidence and will return with preliminary direction. Gavel strike. Case recessed. I stood, slowly, my knees stiff from the tension. I didn't walk over to Samantha. I didn't even glance in her direction. But as I walked out of the courtroom, I caught her reflection in the glass pane of the door, shoulders shaking, lips pressed tight, the reality sinking in. I had not screamed. I had not begged. I had simply shown the truth. The hallway outside the courtroom felt colder than it should have. I sat on the bench just outside the double doors, elbows on my knees, staring at the speckled tile floor. People passed, lawyers murmuring to clients, clerks with clipboards, security officers shifting positions, but I barely registered them. Samantha didn't come out right away. When she did, she walked straight past me, her lawyer trailing behind her like a shadow. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. She paused for half a second, just near the water cooler, and I heard her whisper, "You think this is over?" before disappearing down the hall. It wasn't over. Not yet. Because Samantha didn't know how to lose quietly. The next day, she filed a formal request to dismiss the footage based on psychological coercion. That same afternoon, her friend Chloe posted a barrage of cryptic Instagram stories. You never really know someone. Truth is subjective when fear is involved. My girl is strong no matter how they twist it. People started taking sides. Some mutual friends messaged me. Careful, non-committal. Hey, just checking in, crazy week, huh? I hope this all gets sorted out soon. But I could read between the lines. They were watching, judging, wondering. My sister, Emily, finally called. Matt, she said, I want you to know, I believe you. I always have. I just didn't know what to do with what she was saying. I could hear the shame in her voice, the guilt, and for the first time, I didn't push it away. I get it, I said. It's hard to reconcile two versions of someone. She manipulated all of us, Emily whispered. You're not the only one she fooled. The next courtroom appearance was different, heavier. Samantha didn't look fragile anymore. She looked furious. Her face was flushed, her jaw locked tight. Ms. Whitmore had switched tactics. Now it was about trauma, emotional volatility, misinterpretation of events. She was scared, the lawyer claimed. Sometimes fear manifests in exaggeration. But it doesn't mean there was no truth. I watched Samantha press her lips together, like she was trying to cry and couldn't. Then came the final witness, Ben Carter. Cool, collected, in a charcoal suit with no tie. He presented his findings methodically. Surveillance timestamps. Chain of custody on the hard drive. Confirmation that metadata hadn't been altered. But then he pulled out a small black voice recorder. I also contacted Ms. Grayson's former roommate, he said. With the court's permission, I've obtained a recording of a phone call made just 4 days after the initial restraining order was filed. Ms. Whitmore stood. Objection, Your Honor. This was not previously disclosed. The judge held up a hand. I'll allow it. But this is the final piece I'm accepting. No more theatrics. Ben pressed play. Samantha's voice again. Look, it doesn't even matter if I win. I just need the money from the civil suit. The rest is fluff. What if he sues you for defamation? Let him. Who's going to believe a man accused of abuse? That stigma never leaves. Even if he proves me wrong, I'll still get something. The silence afterward was deafening. Even Ms. Whitmore didn't object again. That night, I got a message from Rachel, Samantha's former best friend, the one who used to throw dinner parties with us, who stopped calling after the breakup. She wrote, I feel sick. I had no idea. I'm so sorry, Matt. And then, if you need someone to testify about her behavior back then, I'm in. One by one, the dominoes fell. Chloe deleted her stories. Mutual friends stopped sharing or reposting Samantha's content. She became radioactive, unapproachable. But the worst came when Lisa, Samantha's older cousin, publicly distanced herself on Facebook. I can't support what I didn't know was happening. I defended a lie. Never again. It was the first time someone from Samantha's own circle chose truth over loyalty. But Samantha didn't go down without a fight. She cornered Emily one day in the courthouse parking lot. My sister told me later, voice still shaking. She said you were manipulating me, that you're dangerous in ways no one sees. She called you a calculating sociopath and said you play the long game. I laughed. Not out of humor, but exhaustion. And you? Emily smiled through the phone. I told her the only thing dangerous about you is your memory. You remember everything, including the truth. But Samantha still tried one last tactic. She arranged a reconciliation meeting through her attorney, offered to settle everything out of court. No money, just mutual silence. She even used the word healing. Mr. Reeves asked me if I wanted to consider it. No, I said. She doesn't get to pretend this was just a misunderstanding. So we went to trial. The jury took 3 days. The verdict, not guilty on all claims. The countersuit for defamation and emotional damages ruled in my favor. The judgment wasn't about money. It wasn't even about reputation. It was about validation. I walked past her in the hallway as we exited the courtroom for the last time. She didn't look at me, but I looked at her. I saw her, really saw her, not as the woman I once loved, but as the lie she tried to become. And I realized something. She wasn't powerful. She was just practiced. And now, her act was over. The courthouse lobby smelled like fresh paint and lemon polish that day. Funny what your senses catch when the noise in your head finally quiets down. I didn't walk out with fists raised or a grin on my face. That's not who I was. I walked out with steady breath, a calm heart, and a small smile that belonged only to me. Mr. Reeves clapped my shoulder. You handled that with more grace than most people I've seen in 20 years, he said. You didn't just win. You preserved yourself. That meant something. The headlines didn't explode. There was no viral drama, no public apology from Samantha. She disappeared into the static of her own making. Quietly left town, from what I heard. Moved to Florida, tried rebranding herself under her middle name, Kate, like the past wouldn't catch up eventually. But I didn't chase her story anymore. Instead, I focused on mine. I started volunteering again with Habitat for Humanity, something I hadn't done in over a year. That first weekend back, I was covered in sawdust and sweat, hammering in nails beside an elderly man named Warren, who barely spoke but gave me a fist bump when we finished. Later that week, I got a text from Rachel, Samantha's old friend. Want to grab coffee sometime? No drama. Just 2 people who believed in the wrong person. We met at a quiet little place called Bean and Oak near downtown. She looked worn, but lighter, like someone who had finally stopped carrying weight that wasn't hers. Do you ever feel like she cast a spell over people? Rachel asked, sipping her latte. I nodded. She didn't cast a spell. She made people feel needed in ways they didn't understand. That's not magic, it's manipulation. Rachel stared at me for a moment, then smiled. I'm glad you're okay. So was I. And then there was Lisa. Lisa had stayed mostly quiet after her public Facebook post. But 3 months after the verdict, she reached out. She said she'd left her job at the nonprofit where Samantha used to work. Said she wanted to start her own initiative, something smaller, focused on women's recovery and ethical advocacy. I want to do it right this time, she told me. I've seen too many stories twisted beyond recognition. I want to help women and make sure the truth matters. She asked if I'd be willing to consult on the architectural plans for her office space. I said yes. Not because I wanted to stay connected to that chapter of my life, but because something good had emerged from it. Healing. Accountability. Change. A few weeks later, I visited my grandmother Lorraine. She was sitting in her sunroom, the afternoon light casting golden streaks across the floor. I knew you'd come out the other side, she said, setting down her knitting needles. You've always had that quiet kind of strength, the kind people underestimate. She handed me a photo from her table. It was of my parents, young, smiling, holding baby me in their arms on a picnic blanket. They would have been proud, she said softly. I didn't say anything. Just sat there, holding the photo, letting my shoulders relax for the first time in what felt like years. Before I left, she handed me something else, a small wooden box. Inside was the pocket watch my father used to carry, the one she'd kept after the accident. "It's yours now," she said. "You've earned time. Real time. Use it well." That night, I wrote a letter, not to Samantha, but to myself. A way to close the chapter. You survived the storm. You didn't just endure it. You navigated it with clarity, calm, and truth. Your strength isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It speaks in dignity, in stillness, in the quiet rebuild that comes after destruction. Let this be the last time you write about her. And the first time you write something just for you. I tucked it into the drawer beside my bed. It was time to start again, not from scratch, but from truth. And that made all the difference. 6 months later, the house finally felt like mine again. Not just because I'd repainted the living room or replaced the old furniture Samantha picked out, though I had. It was something deeper. The way silence returned without tension. The way sunlight settled into corners I'd forgotten existed. The way I could breathe without memory trying to strangle me. The home was mine in spirit now. Every nail, every coat of paint, every window pane was no longer a witness to chaos. It was a declaration of peace. The first thing I did was build the backyard garden. Raise cedar beds. Tomatoes. Lavender. Basil. Things that rooted deeply, quietly, without spectacle. I spent hours with my hands in the dirt, letting the earth remind me that growth doesn't scream. It happens quietly, beneath the surface, until one day everything blooms. The neighborhood noticed. One morning, Mrs. Reynolds, who lived 2 doors down, came by with her grandson, Leo. She'd baked banana bread and handed it to me with a smile that didn't ask questions. "You've been doing a lot of work back here," she said. "It's beautiful." Leo was 6, shy, clinging to her leg. I crouched and offered him a cherry tomato. "It's still warm from the sun," I said. He smiled. "Took it." That's simple. 2 weeks later, he was helping me water the beds on weekends. Then came the letter from the Community Development Board. They'd reviewed my proposal, an idea I'd sketched out on a napkin at Bean and Oak with Rachel during one of our catch-ups, a co-working and support space for people recovering from emotional abuse, men and women. A place that wouldn't define people by their worst chapters, but help them write better ones. The grant came through. Small, but enough. Lisa reached out the day after I got the approval. She'd left her toxic nonprofit job and had already secured 3 counselors who wanted to volunteer. "I was waiting for you to be ready," she said. I spent the next month designing the space. Warm woods, exposed brick, skylights, soft lighting, no sharp edges. I named it The Clearing, a place between forest and field, between confusion and clarity. We opened our doors on a quiet Thursday in early May. The sky was the color of a robin's egg, and a light breeze carried the scent of the garden center next door. Rachel brought homemade scones. Lisa gave a short welcome speech. I just stood by the front desk, watching people trickle in. A woman with a healing scar near her temple. A man in a faded army jacket who hadn't made eye contact with anyone yet. A teenage girl with trembling hands and a journal hugged to her chest. They didn't need words from me. They just needed space. And that was what I'd built. By summer, the house was fully renovated. Not just structurally, but emotionally. I'd replaced the dining table with a long, handmade oak slab I'd built in the garage. It could seat 10. I hosted my first dinner party in over 2 years. Emily came, along with her husband and their twin girls. Rachel, Lisa, Ben Carter, who turned out to be surprisingly funny when he wasn't in court mode. Even Warren from Habitat showed up with a bottle of homemade apple cider. We ate, we laughed, we stayed up late. It felt like home in a way it never had before. At one point, my niece, Madeline, climbed into my lap, pointed at the old black and white photo of my parents above the fireplace and asked, "Is that you when you were little?" I smiled. "No, sweetheart. That's my mom and dad." "Do you miss them?" "Every day." She leaned her head against my chest. "They'd be proud of you." I swallowed hard. Yeah, I whispered. I hope so. After everyone left, I cleaned the dishes in silence. There was no dread, no echo of arguments, no ghost of accusations lingering in the walls. Just the clink of ceramic, the soft buzz of the fridge, the smell of lemon and garlic still hanging in the air. I stepped outside. The garden was lit by solar lanterns. Lavender brushed gently in the breeze. The moon was full, high above the roofline. I sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a flannel blanket, and pulled out the letter I'd written to myself months ago. I unfolded it slowly, reread each word. Then I tore it into small squares. Let the wind carry the pieces away. I didn't need the reminder anymore. I was no longer surviving her story. I was living mine, and it was good.